in light of our time constraint, we have been asked to give the floor 90 seconds to Senator Janet Rice of Australia and a founder of the Greens Party. Senator Rice.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Nguyen. And look, I've just got a few minutes because unfortunately it's 8:30, almost 8:30 in the morning here in Canberra where I am, and I've got a meeting to go to at 8:30 and then a parliamentary hearing at 9 o'clock. So I'm sorry I can't stay with you. Look, I really appreciate it, and I know that Sir Geoffrey has already gone, but I did want to thank him for him joining us this morning and for his work and the work of all the team in making the tribunal happen, and all the amazing complexity and the detail and the evidence which has been brought together by the tribunal. And I think it is so critical because it is clear from this evidence that, you know, the appalling human rights abuses, the appalling torture, the sexual violence, the detention, the killings which have occurred, and where the world needs to be is to work out, is to have that body of evidence to take action. I mean, I'm a senator in the Australian Parliament. We have just upgraded our sanctions regimes to enable us to apply sanctions under Magnitsky-style sanctions regimes against officials of any country or anybody who is responsible for such egregious human rights abuses. And the issue now is, what's the world going to do about it? I heard Sir Geoffrey say how, you know, it's not up to their tribunal to make recommendations as to what to do. And I accept that. It's up to us to work out what to do now that we have got this body of evidence, because it's the evidence which has been lacking up until now. We know that the Chinese Communist Party will never allow in, have not allowed in sort of international human rights observers to gather this evidence. So having this evidence before us gives us now a platform to say, well, the world needs to be taking action. If we are really genuinely committed to upholding sort of human rights for everybody on this globe, and everybody's human rights should be upheld, well, then the world needs to take action. And so what I really want to see is have much more coordinated action. Clearly the UN is hampered in what it can do because of its upgrading.
Could you wrap that up?
Yes, I'm going to, yes. And so we need to work out and be working much more together multilaterally to be taking action, and particularly to taking action across all diplomatic sanctions, economic actions that we can take, and be doing it multilaterally. So thank you, and I'm sorry I can't stay with you for the rest of the session, but I really look forward to hearing of the outcomes of it.
Thank you so much. So next we like to make some acknowledgement. We have Professor Dr. Nguyen. He will acknowledge the organizers of this conference.
Thank you, Attorney Linh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Phúc Nguyen of Vietnam Democracy Center. I'm honored to be here to introduce the organizers. Most Venerable Thích Không Tánh, Vice President, Sangha of Unified Buddhist Church of Vietnam. Subdignitary Hứa Phi, Chair, a representative of the Committee of the Popular Bloc of Cao Đài Church. Mr. Lê Thanh Nhân, Chairman, Vietnamese Nationalist Party. Dr. Đỗ Văn Hội, MD, Overseas Representative Interfaith Council of Vietnam. Mr. Phan Thanh Châu, Vice Chairman, Alliance for Free and Democratic Vietnam. Mr. Trần Anh, President, Viet 2000 Foundation. Dr. Nguyễn Như Phúc, MD, Vice President, Vietnam Democracy Center. Nguyễn Linh, JD, Director, Office of International Relations of the United Buddhist Church of Vietnam. Dr. Nhất Thiên Nguyễn, PhD, President, Vietnam Democracy Center. Miss Nguyễn Văn Nhã, Treasurer, Vietnam Democracy Center. Mr. Nguyễn Đình Tùng, Viet 2000 Foundation. Mr. Phạm Oanh, Research Scientist, Executive Council and Founder, Asian Pacific Policy Roundtable of Minnesota. Hưng Phan, MED, Advisor and former President of the Board of Executives, the Federation of Vietnamese American Communities of the USA. Dr. Trần Quốc Hưng, MD, Coordinator, Alliance for Vietnam's Democracy, and Dr. Mai Thanh Chuyết, PhD, President, Vietnamese Environmental Protection Society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen. Next, we have Professor Hung Phan, who will acknowledge the organizations in attendance of the conference.
Oh, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes.
We would like to thank the 64 organizations from across the world who are participating today. They come from Canada, China, France, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, India, the UK, and the US. Participation from NGOs are very important in this endeavor and often the driving force behind the action of government. Speaking of governments, we also would like to recognize the distinguished advisors, directors, and staff from 13 congressional and parliamentarian offices and 2 US senatorial offices. We look forward to working with you in the near future to push for an end to this genocide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Phan. The second part of this conference is the roundtable of discussants. We are pleased to acknowledge there are over 30 discussants of the roundtable and 45 dignitaries in attendance from over 21 nations in 10 different time zones. We are grateful for your concern and interest in the ongoing genocide in Xinjiang. It's an honor to have your presence. Next, we introduce our moderator for the roundtable, Luc de Pulford, co-chair Inter-Parliamentary Alliance in China, a member of the Foreign Affairs Defense and Trade Select Committee, co-founder Coalition of Genocide Response. Please welcome Luc.
Hello, I hope this is working and you can all hear me. I am great. Okay, it's Luc Pulford here, coordinator of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance from China. I'm very grateful to Linh, David, and other organizers for the privilege of trying to moderate this panel. It's good to be among friends this evening, particularly so many members of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China from around the world. I'm going to take this opportunity, please, to extend a warm invitation to legislators present who are not yet members of IPAC. Please do consider joining. This is an authentically cross-party and international group of legislators helping to reframe the China debate, and we believe for the better. Information on how to join is at ipac.global. Please do think about that. Look, this evening's discussion between legislators is intended to provide a space within which you can all share your views and ideas about what you, legislators, can do to help Uyghurs and other minorities suffering so terribly at the hands of the party state in China, especially in light of the Uyghur Tribunal judgment. To help cohere this discussion, we did send around a list of questions, and we asked each of you to indicate which you would prefer to address. So I'm going to call upon those who replied to that email first, and we'll use the remainder of the time for discussion. Do use the raise hand function or the chat box if you'd like to speak. We have 1 hour, and to enable contributions from as many members as possible in this wonderfully well-attended call, we have to limit our contributions to 2 minutes each. Legislators, I beg your forgiveness in advance if I have to cut you off after this period has elapsed. Please do help me make time for others, and please do try to orientate your contributions towards what might be useful for your colleagues around the world to hear. I was also asked to give my own short contextual introduction, but the only reflection I really want to add is this. The Uyghur Tribunal is easily the most comprehensive, easily the most rigorous, and therefore easily the most useful tool that civil society has been given, or has given to those of us who are seeking to hold the PRC accountable for its treatment of Uyghurs and other minorities. It is not to be compared with the individual opinions of lawyers or reports of NGOs, useful though they can be. The Uyghur Tribunal received hundreds of thousands of pages of evidence, and as an independent body, as you've just heard, determined that genocide, crimes against humanity, and torture have all been committed by the PRC state beyond a reasonable doubt. I believe the fact that the tribunal is not in itself binding on governments poses a powerful challenge to the legislators on this call around the world. How will you ensure that the tribunal's judgment is not ignored by your respective governments? So we have until 10:30, that's UK time, 5:30 Eastern. Please do mute your microphone if you're not speaking. On to the first question, which was, what do you think your government should be doing in response to the Uyghur Tribunal judgment? We were due to call upon Senator Jeff Merkley as the first person to address this question. I don't know if he's on the call. Senator Merkley, if you're on the call, please do unmute and speak now. You have the floor. If not, we will go to the second person that we had down to address that question, who was Louisa Wall MP from New Zealand. Louisa, are you on the call? Do we have Louisa Wall MP on the call? Okay, we'll move on to the next discussant. That would be Simon O'Connor MP, also from New Zealand. Simon, are you on the call?
I am, Luke, and hello to everyone. Thank you. I'll try to keep to 90 seconds, so cut me off, Luke. Hey, to everyone here, thank you, and a particular acknowledgement to Sir Geoffrey and all those involved with the tribunal. There's always a quote for me which stands out, granted from someone much earlier in life, who said, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know." And what the tribunal has done has clearly exposed the crimes occurring against the Uyghur people. For New Zealand, we've got a way to go to respond, from the small actions, if you will, to the larger ones, and I'll very quickly touch on that. The smaller ones is obviously New Zealand needs to be looking to those Uyghurs trying to flee the country, of how we assist them into countries like New Zealand through visa changes and so forth, direct conversations, as you might anticipate, with the CCP government. And to be fair, I'm an opposition MP, but our government is speaking to Chinese authorities. But as a parliamentarian, we have two major lacks in New Zealand. One is that we do not have a modern slavery bill, as many other countries do, which allow us to address, well, aspects of those crimes being perpetrated in the likes of the Xinjiang province and against the Uyghurs. New Zealand does not have that form of legislation. The second is that New Zealand still does not have Magnitsky type legislation, where we're actually able to hold account and sanction individuals. So there are two major aspects there. And I know myself and Louisa Wall, my colleague in the New Zealand Parliament, continue to work and push for changes there. So we've also been led by other countries. Australia's beating us. So to my Australian colleagues, thank you with this legislation, but all support from legislatures around the world to help New Zealand. Pressure for change is welcome. And on that, Luke, I'll say thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. That was a wonderfully rich contribution. I can see we do have Senator Jeff Merkley. Senator Merkley, would you like to make a contribution? If you can hear me, do unmute. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, I'm going to go to the next person I have on the list, which is Els van Hoof, MP from Belgium. Els, please do unmute and give your contribution.
Thank you very much, Luke. I'm also a co-chair for IPAC, so I can recommend also the colleagues to participate in IPAC because it's very interesting to share ideas on everything what China concerns. But I think the Uyghur Tribunal did very important work. It's vital. But also in Belgium, I also contributed to a resolution that was voted already in July 21. Not only did we unequivocally denounce a violation of Uyghur human rights as a crime against humanity, but we also explicitly recognize that there is a serious risk of genocide against the Uyghur minority based on the Convention of 48. So that's very important, I think, the work that we did there, and we found the majority for that in Parliament. We also called for strong support for the appointment of an international research mission in line with the recommendations of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. But I additionally had also made a component in this resolution that we also should work towards strict import restrictions in order to ban goods originating from forced labor from Xinjiang. And the recent Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act from the United States is a good example for this. So that was a recommendation from Parliament to our government, and that we have to put economic pressures to hit China and a signal that this atrocious oppression must stop immediately. So we think that the times of general condemnation are over and we need strong measures. That's why we are also working in the Belgian Parliament on a due diligence act, not only versus China, but versus all countries which are not respecting human rights and are creating forced labor. So I think these are very important, strong measures which are being taken by Belgian Parliament and also being followed by the Belgian government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Els. I'm going to hand over now to Nusrat Ghani MP, who is labelled as Mr. Tim Loughton, but is in fact Nusrat Ghani MP. Over to you, Nus.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you to everybody else that's on the call. I have been leading the work on genocide with my colleagues, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith and the real Tim Loughton, who will be speaking shortly. The Uyghur Tribunal, which took place in London, puts extra pressure on my government to now finally take a position. Now it's been made aware that there is a genocide taking place. It has to conduct an exercise to state whether it believes that there is a genocide taking place or there is not, and to present that evidence to us in the UK. I will be leading a debate next Thursday in the UK Parliament to ask the UK government to take a position. We also now must conduct some due diligence to ensure that the UK government and consumers in the UK are in no way aiding and abetting in this genocide. And we know that Uyghur slave labour is involved in many products that end up on our shelves in the UK. So we're asking for firms that are based in Xinjiang and using Uyghur slave labour to be blacklisted. We're asking for those products not to be on our shelves. And we're also asking for those individuals, those Chinese officials that are involved in the incarceration, torture and the genocide of the Uyghur people are sanctioned as well. The Uyghur Tribunal provides not only a substantial evidence, but also quite a serious determination of genocide, which makes it impossible for governments, firms, and individuals to now continue to hold the position that they weren't aware what was going on or the evidence does not stack up. I urge all the legislators on the call to follow the UK Parliament next Thursday, when I'll be joined by legislators in Westminster to whilst we hold this debate, and we hope that colleagues around the world can pick up our motion and replicate it in their national parliaments as well. Thank you so much, Luke.
Thank you very much indeed, Nuz. And just to remind to all the MPs, all the legislators on the call, we are discussing what MPs, what legislators around the world can do in response to the Uyghur Tribunal and sharing ideas about that. The next name I have on my list is Lord Bethell, who's a former health minister. Lord Bethell, can you hear me? If so, do unmute and make your contribution for a couple of minutes. Do we have Lord Bethell? No, we don't. Okay, in which case we can go back to Louisa Wall, MP from New Zealand, who I'm very pleased to see has been able to join on this link. Louisa, another co-chair of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China for New Zealand, but also sits on the Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee in New Zealand. Over to you, Louisa.
Kia ora, Luke. Kia ora koutou, and again an acknowledgement to Sir Geoffrey and the Tribunal for the evidence that they have provided to us. And I guess it is about the status of that evidence. Our government required judicial findings. I'm sure every other Parliament is the same. So from my perspective, I think the UN High Commissioner report for Human Rights report that is due imminently is going to be incredibly helpful and obviously change the status for many of us in terms of the evidence we require to act. But just following on from my colleague Simon, I do want to highlight that we ratified ILO protocol to the Forced Labour Convention in December 2019. We have released in March last year an action plan for against forced labour, people trafficking and slavery. And we did convene in August 2021 a modern slavery leadership advisory group, and they will formally advise the government on the best way of taking this issue and have highlighted possible legislation. So we are taking action, but I guess what I wanted to say is the issue that we all have is a credible source to provide evidence for our governments to move, which is why we should be doing as much as we can to support Michelle Bachelet in her role as the UN Human Rights Commissioner. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Louisa, for that. Senator Merkley, I think we have you on the line now. Can I call upon you to give us a couple of minutes of contribution? Thank you, Senator.
Oh, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to all the members of the Tribunal for your essential work to shed light on the atrocities being carried out in Xinjiang. And thank you for the invitation to join today's discussion regarding the plight of the Uyghur people who at the very moment, as we are here, are being forced to endure not only the violation of their rights as humans, but forced into slavery and acts of genocide affecting them as outlined by the international community. Here in the United States, our nation has sought to bring attention to what's occurring in Xinjiang. Two administrations of very different perspectives and different political parties have both officially declared that the actions being taken by the Chinese government against the Uyghur community is in fact genocide. And our government, the United States government, has declared a diplomatic boycott of next month's Olympic Winter Games over the human rights abuses of Xinjiang and elsewhere. And I might add that as the chair of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, which addresses human rights in China, I've been doing all I can to hold hearings to highlight these abuses and to call for every possible approach to magnify attention during this moment when the world will be looking to China with the start of the games just a short time from now. Through the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, the Congress has given our president and our Secretary of State authority to use financial and visa entry sanctions to hold Chinese officials who are complicit in these egregious human rights abuses. We've also put export restrictions in place to stop US companies from helping to build high-tech surveillance system that's being used. And recently, President Biden signed into law the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And I'm particularly connected to that because Senator Marco Rubio and I crafted that bill and fought for it to get passed. And we want a strong message that America's consumers and our marketplace are not going to be complicit in these abuses. Still, so much more needs to be done. With the large scope of forced labor in Xinjiang, we have to assume that whatever products come from there are being made through forced labor. We have in our bill a safe harbor if you can meet standards to prove otherwise. It's certainly my hope that those companies that are continuing to produce in that region will quickly work to move out of the region if they cannot utilize the safe harbor in the bill and send a powerful message that the companies themselves will not be complicit in these actions. And I hope governments across the globe will do similar actions to what we have just done here in America, because it simply is such a more powerful, effective strategy if multiple governments engage simultaneously in the similar effort. So since I have your all's attention, I would encourage you to go back, look at the provisions of our Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, and consider enacting the same similar provisions in your own legislative process. The greater the number of countries that take a stand against these tainted imports, the more effective we will be, the more attention China will pay. And the more unified we can be, the better our chances of costs and consequences for the beneficiaries of slave labor. It's hard for me to say that in the face of genocide and slave labor, our best recourse is economic tools. But that is what we have. And so let's apply them as effectively as we possibly can and have the Chinese government think twice about what they're doing. Because working together, we can strike at the heart of a major funding source for the genocide against the Uyghurs and prevent China from gaining a market advantage from the use of slave labor. And hopefully Beijing will start to rethink how their global brand is compromised and damaged. Their leadership is damaged, their soft power is damaged when they're engaging in horrendous violations of human rights because the world is paying attention. So thank you to all of the 100+ world organizations participating in this conference for being invested in this fight for human decency, this fight specifically against genocide being used against the Uyghur ethnic minority. Thank you for letting me share your conference time and share these comments.
Thank you very much indeed, Senator Merkley, and for all of your work. I would like now to call upon Garnet Jenis MP from Canada. Garnet, could you please take the floor, another co-chair of the Interparliamentary Alliance of China? Over to you, Garnet.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here with all of you, some people that I don't know as well, but many friends, both from the Canadian Parliament and from IPAC, from legislatures all over the world. Canada is a country where Parliament has led, but unfortunately, the government has not stepped up at the same level as our Parliament has. It was the Canadian Parliament that was the first Parliament in the world to unanimously pass a motion recognizing the Uyghur genocide, and as a result of an amendment from one of my colleagues on this call, Mr. Brunel Duceppe, also to call for a relocation of the Olympic Games. Canada's parliamentary response has been effective in part because we have a strong Canada Uyghur Parliamentary Friendship Group that I co-chair along with Mr. Samir Zubari, who's also on the call, and there's a number of others here that are involved in that group. So I would encourage other parliamentarians to consider specifically a Uyghur Parliamentary Friendship Group that can work on these issues. Some of the initiatives we're working on in Canada that I hope we'll be able to move forward on in this Parliament are getting the government to recognize the Uyghur genocide, passing new tough supply chain slavery legislation, passing an organ harvesting and trafficking bill. We have an organ harvesting and trafficking bill that has already passed the Senate and is now in the House of Commons, and we're going to be working on getting that passed as soon as possible, making it a criminal offense for a person to go abroad and receive an organ without consent. And we will continue to press the government on applying Magnitsky sanctions to more individuals involved in the Uyghur genocide. I would encourage other countries to pass Magnitsky sanctions legislation. And also, when you put forward Magnitsky sanctions legislation, include provisions where there can be a parliamentary trigger so that it's not just up to the government to initiate the process, but where parliamentarians can effectively nominate individuals for addition to the Magnitsky sanctions list and the government can respond. So those are a few of the items we're working on that I'd encourage others to consider. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed, Garnet. I'm going to go now to Tim Loughton MP from the UK. Over to you, Tim.
Luke, thank you very much, and congratulations to Sir Geoffrey and everybody involved with the Tribunal. I think it's been a tremendously important piece of work. I just pick up really where Senator Merkley left off, in that the Uyghur Forced Labour Prevention Act, which is what this question addresses, I think is a really important piece of legislation coming from the states, and the states has really led the way on this. Absolutely, we're trying to pressurise our own government for having similar sort of measures in the UK. We're trying to replicate the Tibet and Xinjiang reciprocal access legislation, which again started in the US. We have, I think, done quite a good job in terms of some of the sanctions we've started to bring in against individuals in China. Not enough, we need to go further. Some of the restrictions we're now putting on British businesses dealing with questionable interests in Xinjiang, and we need to go much further. We have now persuaded the government to have a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics. We forced the British government to revise its relationship with Huawei, and we've allowed the Commons to vote on genocide recognition. So there's a lot that's going on. But I think the point Senator Markley made is it will be so much more powerful if it's internationally coordinated between governments and parliaments. And that's so important for parliamentarians to meet, to have the same song sheet that we're using in all our parliaments and lobbying our governments around the world. And ultimately, we need to see an accreditation mark on anything coming out of Xinjiang to show that it is legitimate. And if that could have an international recognition, that will go a long way showing that the world is at last standing up to China, calling out China, and there are implications and penalties if China continues to have a flagrant disregard of human rights and abuse its people in Xinjiang as it has been done so flagrantly. And the more we can coordinate our action on that, then the quicker it's going to have the desired effect on China. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. We're going to move to the next question now, if we may, which was, what is preventing your government from responding to the Uyghur Tribunal judgment? And what do you think can be done to overcome it? What is preventing your government from responding to the judgment? So a difficult question, and we're going to go first, if we may, to Honourable Ahmed Munzur Sheikh Emam from South Africa. If you can unmute, please, and give your 2-minute contribution, that would be fantastic, if you can still hear me.
Thank you very much for that, and allow me to congratulate the tribunal on their success. There are 2 points here. I think the first one is the question of what prevents my government. And remember, the South African government particularly is conflicted in that South Africa is indebted to China. That's the first problem. And remember, the entire African continent has a problem because we're indebted to China. That's the first thing. In fact, if you talk about human rights abuse, we have that in South Africa as well by the Chinese, and it's a matter that has been repeatedly highlighted, on particularly we have a minimum wage in the country, and what the Chinese pay the local South Africans in the country is not even 25% of what they're supposed to pay, and very little or nothing happens to that. But more importantly, one of the things that prevent us from going further is the fact that the Chinese government funds political parties, particularly those that are in governance in certain countries. And so they have this leeway, and that's the first problem. But I think on the issue of what we can actually do is I think there needs to be mass mobilization, boycotting of products, sanctions against them, and creating awareness amongst political parties, legislators in our National Assembly as well. And I think that will go a long way in being able to, but I think it needs to be an international effort, organization of activists from throughout the world that must come together to be able to deal with this. But if we're going to expect countries, particularly in the African continent, to be able to do this in isolation, it will be very, very difficult. But I can assure you that from my side, particularly as a member of parliament, I will do everything and every effort will be put to ensure that I will highlight the awareness of the Uyghur community, the tribunal's judgment itself, and mobilize political parties and things and the communities and set up some structures in place so that, we could, through the social media and other platforms, create awareness in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emam. I'm going to call now Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, MP, another co-chair of IPAC. Sir Ian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luke. I'm going to be brief. All I want to say is very simply the thing that stands in the way of this excellent report, essentially becoming the position for all the governments, that is to say that there is genocide taking place amongst the Uyghur in Xinjiang, is rank cowardice by governments, and I rank ours exactly the same as others. They're all compromised. All of them are busy buying goods from China. They don't really want to figure out where it's coming from. There's a lot of talk about it, but to be quite frank with you, it's far easier not to do so. I know that the imports to the UK from China have rocketed in the last year and a half. A lot of that is to do with the terrible virus that, of course, did come from China, and which China lied about for some time, thus enabling it to become a pandemic. So we have, all of us, tiptoed around this issue, and it's time we stop doing it. The reality is, number one, Luke said it earlier on, we formed IPAC so that the international community of parliamentarians could come together to put pressure on their governments to do something about it. Many of our governments, and I look around the list here, are in exactly the same boat. They're worried about upsetting China, and so they tiptoe around them, and we have to kind of kick them into it. So IPAC is really important. So if you're not members of IPAC, I do encourage you as parliamentarians to join so we can coordinate our pressure, and that pressure does work. It really does work. If it wasn't working, why are so many members of IPAC now sanctioned by the Chinese government, myself included, Tim, I see on this and Nuz and others in Europe as well, all sanctioned by the Chinese because Mr. President Xi thinks that we're hurting their reputation. Well, that does tell me something. So it's very important, therefore, that we coordinate all this activity. And the only way to get governments to do this is to find that actually other governments are doing it, and that puts pressure on them. And chasing supply chains and disrupting those supply chains, calling them out, using Magnitsky sanctions to hammer those officials that are involved in this is all part of the process. So let's all be part of IPAC. Let's drive this forward together. And let's make sure that governments that are compromised by their commitments in financial trade with China cannot escape the reality that they, by doing nothing, are recognizing genocide and going along with it, and we need to stop it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sir Ian. I'm going to come now also to, again, actually to Simon O'Connor MP, who had indicated his willingness to address this question from New Zealand, obviously a very proximate country and one very exposed economically. Simon, if you're willing to contribute on this, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think the fundamental problem, and Sir Ian and others have touched on it, is that New Zealand as a small country is worried about repercussions from China. I mean, let's be blunt, countries like New Zealand are highly dependent on a trade relationship with the likes of China. And so we have to navigate that quite carefully. So that really is the fundamental issue. Secondly, I think there is sometimes a lack of awareness in countries like New Zealand. It probably applies to other countries too. People are domestically quite focused on issues at home. And I know for myself, when I ever use social media, for example, to talk about what's happening, say in China, a lot of Kiwis are, well, why are you talking about that international experience and not what's happening domestically? So there's a challenge there, I'd suggest, for people like myself, Larissa and other New Zealand MPs and leaders to make sure Kiwis or New Zealanders understand what's happening. And we somewhat did that successfully around Hong Kong to say, hey, look, a democracy that might not be our own has been crushed, but this has implications for New Zealand. In other words, if we believe in democracy in New Zealand, we believe it in Hong Kong. If we believe in human rights in New Zealand, we should be standing up for human rights in China and other countries. So there's probably two elements there. One is just the awareness question and needing to build that, and that's where the likes of IPAC, for example, come into its own. But also, to be frank and honest, there is always that worry around trade, and no government, no parliament wants to be directly responsible for undermining that. So it is a little bit of a navigation point, but I think it's fair to say through you, Mr. Chair, Luke, that we still need to press forward. I just finished with this thought. If we're going to have free trade with countries such as China, then we must be free to share our views and viewpoints around the likes of democracy and to call out human rights abuses as loudly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Going back to South Africa now with Mr. Genif Hendricks, MP. Genif, if you'd like to unmute and give your 90-second to 2-minute contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Honorable Genif Hendricks, a Member of Parliament in South Africa. Our government has trade agreements with China, and I'm sure that it will not want to scuttle that for any reason. So they will be hesitant to speak out about the genocide and the slavery. I'm in Cape Town, and we have a 400-year history of slavery and quite a number of activist groups. Now that the tribunal has pronounced, we will activate those groups. We've already sent a parliamentary written question to the Minister of Trade and Industry to inform them of the decision of the tribunal. and we will take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hendricks. I think we also had a contribution here from Samir Zubiri's MP, also from Canada. Samir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luke, and I want to thank Sir Gafrinis and his team for the very important finding. So much has been said, I won't repeat it, except to say that, that at the end, as advocates and as parliamentarians, as civil society leaders, I feel strongly that we all share the same goal, which is to see what's happening to the Uyghur people unfolding right now to stop. And that's our call, our clear call. It's one that is a noble one, one that is just and in conformity with international law. And for us, I think we can all agree that if and when, we are not just asking if, we're expecting when this does stop, this genocide towards Uyghur people, we will have no beef whatsoever with China on this file. The government of the day and the style of leadership that is there right now. I think also all of us can agree that that we need to speak out around discrimination in all of its forms. We saw during COVID the rise of anti-Asian discrimination in some of our countries. I'm sure that we do speak out on this issue. And that's important for us to actually do so in a meaningful way. But I didn't want to take away anything from what's been said thus far. I obviously personally support all that has been said as a member of the governing party here in Canada. I work closely with Garnet and with Alexia Brunel-Duceppe, Garnet Jennis, who are across the aisle. Arnold Versen is here. We have a Senator Duchesne, who is also here from our Canadian Senate. Canada is well represented. We are working together across party lines on this very important human rights issue. I hope other legislatures do the same, and I'm sure that you are. Finally, I'll say that that it's critical that we continue as an international community to work together and support each other in seeing that this genocide is halted. I do believe that is possible. That is our goal. It's not simply an abstract concept. It's something that I do believe can happen and will happen with our continued advocacy. Thank you, Luke, for your leadership.
Thank you very much, Shabir. I'm going to hand over now to Lynn to take the next question. Over to you, Lynn, to pose the question and to chair some questions.
Thanks so much, Luke. So we have, thank you for handing over. And we have a question, it has to do with trade again, but this is a different thread, so to speak. There's evidence that the CCP in some countries, such as Vietnam, has been involved in deceptive trade practices of relabeling merchandise to defeat the ban on the products made with forced labor from Xinjiang region of China. Is there a mechanism or an oversight to report such practice? And this question goes to the Honorable Imam.
Sheikh Imam?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much for that. Okay, yeah. I think that the issue here is this is a common practice actually. And you'll find this time and time again. We found exactly the same problem with Israel and the products that were coming into the country. And I think you need some form of intelligence from the country of origin, of course, to be tracked to the countries that they actually got. But together with a process in each country of boycotting these products and being able to establish where the products are coming from, in these respective countries, I think that if the communities together and if you have mass mobilization of bringing the communities together to highlight the plight of the Uyghur community and getting them to boycott those products, because it's not going to happen from a country perspective. It is rather has to come from the communities themselves. And I think with organizations like we have in South Africa, like the BDS movement and things, they've gone quite a far to be able to restrict the sale of some of the products that we were trying to restrict in the country. So I think, yes, indeed, it's a coordinated effort that needs to be enhanced through the process of the origin, country of origin, and of course highlighted in a country like South Africa as well. So from our perspective, I think in South Africa, if we mobilize the people, we've done a fantastic piece of work with BDS currently, and I think we'll go a long way in that. But from South Africa itself, from a government perspective, and I think Honorable Hanif Hendricks have already said to you, our entire manufacturing industry in South Africa is at a standstill, particularly your textile, leather, and plastic industry, because of the imports and because they're indebted to China. So I think we'll go a long way in terms of mobilizing support in the country to boycott these products and be able to identify those products that, that are being relabeled. Thank you very much.
Yes. I'm seeing here that my next question will probably need to be delayed. Luke, I will hand it over to your last question.
Okay, so this was a question about what can be done to secure immediate, meaningful, and unfettered access to Xinjiang for the UN and independent observers in line with various recommendations from various UN bodies. I wonder if anybody wants to come in on that. I know some of you have worked on it particularly. Louisa, I know you particularly, it's something that interests you. But if there's anybody else who hasn't made a contribution yet and wants to speak about unfettered access to Xinjiang and what can be done on that, please do raise your hand now or unmute and speak. Otherwise, I'm going to call upon you, Louisa, perhaps to speak about what you've been doing on that. Louisa, over to you.
Well, kia ora anō, and thank you, Luke. I think I'm doing what we're all doing, which is to support our government's calls. I mean, our government have highlighted the need for the UN to gather the evidence so they can make a determination about how best to respond. And in lieu of the judicial findings, as I said before, a report from the UN High Commissioner that highlights the abuses in Xinjiang, I think will absolutely shift, government country responses to how we then deal with it. In the meantime, obviously all we can do is continue to call for that unfettered access. But I'm aware there were media reports just before Christmas that a report is imminent. And so maybe as a next step within this context, I don't know how easy it is to get Michelle Bachelet and whether or not she'd be willing to engage with us. But I do think after hearing Sir Geoffrey and obviously the evidence that the tribunal has being available is one thing, but that's why I asked if there had been any formal engagement between the tribunal and the UN Human Rights Commission, and actually formally giving that evidence rather than just having it available if they request it. Because until we have what is akin to judicial findings, and within the context we have, it's impossible. So in lieu of that, I think a report from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights is really the only viable mechanism that will motivate and I think put a lot of pressure on governments to move to recognising what is actually happening there. So I will continue to have discussions with my Minister of Foreign Affairs, like most of us, but I'm also really clear that in lieu of those judicial findings, a UN report is, I think, the only viable way forward.
Thank you very much, Louisa. And yes, there is an imminent report, which was encouraged. Actually, the publication was apparently brought forward after the Uyghur Tribunal. So one of the many achievements of the Uyghur Tribunal. I'm going to go now to Canada again, to Alexis Brunel-Doucet from the Bloc Québécois in Canada. Alexis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luke. I want to say thank you to all the members of the Tribunal. And of course, I salute all my friends, legislators from all around the world. And a big hello to my friend Dolconisa. So you will excuse me, English is not my first language, so I'll try to sound intelligent. A lot have been said here. Of course, I agree with everything that have been said, especially from my friends from other parties in Canada. Economic sanctions, of course, Magnitsky sanctions, forced labor act legislation. Of course, we all agree with that. But I will underline one thing that might have not been said, and this is very important, because sometimes as legislator, we are stuck in a parliamentarian bubble, and then we lose contact with ordinary people sometimes. And this is very important for me, since the Uyghur genocide, nobody was talking about it before we linked it with the Olympics in Beijing. When I wrote an open letter that my friend Samir and Garnet signed it from all other parties. And suddenly people on the street were talking about it. Suddenly people at the coffee machine were talking about it, in the bus station, at the dinner with their kids. And it's very important in our democracy. When you have the public opinion, you can, bring that in the House and make legislation more efficient. When you have the image and the public opinion, I hope I make myself clear here, because it's very important. As other MPs, I said it before, and Senator Rice said it, MP O'Connor said it. We have to seek multilateral actions, and to succeed in multilateral action, we need to have our population with us on this particular subject. So that's why we link the Olympics with the Uyghur genocide here in Canada, and that's how we made a lot of noise, and it went international. And I think we attacked China on her pride, on her image, and this is this is another point that's very important. So let's keep working together. Luke, I'll call you tomorrow to join IPAC for sure. The invitation is there, so I'll be there. And I want to thank you to everybody. I'm sorry again for my English. I'll improve it. I'll be better next time. But just remember, everybody, we are MPs, but we need our population with us when we are on those kind of subjects. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alexis. If I could just ask now, before we go to a quick summing up and then a contribution from Dolgan Issa, the president of the World Uyghur Congress, I would like to ask any of the legislators on our very large panel here who have not spoken if they would like to make a brief contribution. Are there any legislators who have not spoken who would like to make a general contribution? Now is your opportunity to raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So what I will do then is very quickly raise a few things which I believe have come up. One is the use of parliamentary mechanisms to raise awareness, even if you don't necessarily win those things, even if they're motions that don't secure legislative change, they can help your populations, your constituents, and the people of your country to understand what's happening. International partnership and coordination is something you are all desiring to do. IPAC can be a vehicle for that, but there are other vehicles too. Certainly we should be encouraging our governments to do that as well. Magnitsky sanctions for those countries that don't yet have Magnitsky legislation. This might be something you can share expertise on. I hope that the organizers of this conference can perhaps send out to everybody else some of the initiatives that have been pursued by various legislators on this call. And finally, I might mention an initiative which has just been launched in the UK, which seeks to mandate the UK government to perform an assessment about a serious risk of genocide. You've heard serious risk being mentioned a few times on this call, and that really should be the trigger for state responsibility under the Genocide Convention. Very few states perform those assessments because of the serious legal obligations attached to them. So trying to find ways that you can mandate your governments to do those assessments would be very powerful, and that's something underway in the UK. So all of that said, that's enough from me. I'll hand over to you, Lynn, to introduce Dolgan Issa from the World Uyghur Congress. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the discussion, and we are coming to a close, and your insights are greatly appreciated. Endearingly, the Vietnamese people call each other Dong Bao, people of the same pouch. The 4,000-year-old legend of the union of Lac Long Quân and Oka told of 100 eggs in a common pouch, representing 100 children, 100 tribes, 100 voices, and a celebration of diversity of people, culture, and ideas. Today, we stand with our brothers and sisters in Xinjiang. There is no place in our human family for genocide or forced organ harvesting. We will end this conference with a closing remark from Dolkan Issa, President World Uyghur Congress. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Lynn. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many of my good friends and the friends of Uyghur today. I would like to thank organizer and inviting me to deliver a closing remark for this important event, which has highlighted the importance of the Uyghur Tribunal and the weight of its judgment. It has been with utmost appreciation that World Uyghur Congress and the Uyghur diaspora community worldwide has followed the proceedings of the Uyghur Tribunal over the past year and a half. We are extremely thankful Sir Jeffrey Nice, the tribunal members and its staff and the volunteers for all their time and hard work that they have dedicated to this daunting task. Not only tribunal judgment itself, but entire process of the Uyghur Tribunal has been of great significance to the Uyghurs and the Kazakh people. During the two in-person hearings in June and September 2021, more than 2,000 Uyghur and the Kazakh camp survivors and the others who have suffered from the Chinese government's unspeakable crimes, including myself, were given opportunity to tell their stories. Of course, we have done so countless times already, but to provide witness testimony to independent legal bodies that investigates Chinese crimes, give us feeling that our experience and the suffering were finally being properly considered. In the final judgment of the tribunal, ruling that China's government is committing crime against humanity, genocide, brought a great sense of relief. At that same time, it is confirmed that this distress that has been rooted in our heart and mind for many years now. Because while the Uyghur Tribunal judgment has been great victory for the Uyghur people or loved one in Turkestan continue to suffer every day. The judgment such highlights the need increasing collaboration between the national government, multilateral institutions, the private sector, citizens globally took meaningful action to end the Uyghur genocide and hold its perpetrators to account. It is with the call to actions that I would like to conclude while putting our legal responsibility to act upon signatory of the UN Genocide Convention. Non-individual who believes in basic human rights and freedom can now close their eyes to what's happening to the Uyghur people in Turkestan. The time is to act now, and thank you for all your attention, and so thanks for your help.
Again, thank you all for attending the conference. We hope that you will continue to support the organization that stand up against genocide and torture, that you will champion the advancement of human rights and human dignity. Have a good rest of the day and stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Merci. Merci.
Thank you. Goodbye.
You.
Thank you.